what are some common themes you see in people with food addiction?
Well, food addiction is such a fascinating arena. For a long time, it didn't have any science backing it up. I wanted to write a paper on food addiction 25 years ago, and I couldn't find enough research to be able to write that paper for university, or 20 years ago, whatever it was. And that has since changed. We now have just an avalanche and a continuing avalanche, really pointing directly to food addiction, because when we look specifically at what we call ultra processed or hyper palatable foods, those are the processed foods that combine typically sugar and fat, typically saturated fat. When we combine the sugar and the saturated fats together, it just acts on neural pathways that are incredibly dysregulating for us, really. We know that sugar alone sits on some of the same neural pathways as our responses to alcohol or cocaine would. So without even adding those tasty, creamy, delicious fats to the picture, sugar by itself can be a substance of addiction for people. We see genetic links between people who have or have the risk of sugar addiction, as well as have the risk or the experience of alcohol addiction, or even if they've had alcoholism earlier in their family, their risk of having that tendency towards sugar is higher than in a group of people who didn't have that family history. So it's really tightly linked, those addictive patterns genetically and in terms of the neural wiring. And so I think the great news about that is it can help people not take it on board personally in some sense. Like, it's not your fault if that's the genetic package you got handed. It's not your fault if your particular response to something like sugar is just that craving and that cycle. Not your fault. And knowing it, then you get the responsibility to decide, well, what do I want to do with it? What are the changes I want to make to be able to feel healthy and feel good and not be held hostage by a food addiction, for example.
Yeah. When I look back, well, one, nutrition really isn't taught in school, and not even in med school, really. And when I went and saw doctors and dermatologists about my skin over and over and over again, and getting prescribed 20 steroid creams, they never once asked about my diet, and all they did was hand me more drugs. It baffles me, and that motivates me to get the message across that drugs aren't the answer. Food is the answer. Food has always been the ultimate medicine, but it's also the ultimate poison. The longer you eat foods that release inflammatory chemicals in the body, the bigger the negative effect is that's coming. And for me, I experienced it at the age of 26. And for some others, they're going to experience it at the age of 50 or 60. Okay. And but it's coming. And that's why I want to help as many people as I can to optimize their health starting today.
I love that. And that perspective, even that your struggles were actually a gift, because I 100% agree with you that there's some patterns of eating that are indisputably dragging down our health outcomes if we had a long enough perspective to be able to see. They're just, the data are clear on that. We get old and we get sick because of those lifestyle habits of a whole life. But it can be hard to see that when we're 25, when we're 30, when we're 40, and we're busy with our families and building our careers and all that, and we still feel okay. It's hard to see that train wreck happening, and then that can be really hard to find the motivation to make those changes and that clarity to understand why it would be beneficial to go through the discomfort of changing something. Whereas for some of us, we might have had that experience of kind of a really obvious warning sign telling us this isn't working, you need to do something different. It's dramatic, it's acute, it's right now. And so being able to have that mindset of gratitude even for that, because it prompted you on your healing journey and now touching others as well. A great way to look at it as a net benefit.
Mm-hmm. And when I look on Instagram, there's a bunch of moms who feel helpless because their kids have severe eczema. And then I reach out to them and ask them what foods are the kids eating. And it's just the most inflammatory foods you can think of. And then they go around to all kinds of doctors to try to fix the problem with creams and topicals, and they just have no idea that it's food related, which baffles me because you would think that there should be a parenting class and nutrition should be the first class taught.